section 15, subsection 1. See, section 15 deals with value of supply. Section 15 is the only section related to value of supply, and then we have valuation rules, that is CGST rules related to valuation. And it's a very important area, mainly for practical questions. It's a small topic only. It's a small topic only, but very important, mainly for practical questions, because lot of practical questions will be framed on this particular topic. Okay, so easily 10 marks, and even that 14-mark question, it will have some impact on value of supply, or a dedicated 10-mark question can be coined based on this. So first, section 15. Section 15 subsection 1 says the value of supply is the transaction value. Whatever is the value, nothing but the transaction value. Transaction value means what? Price involved in the transaction. So for example, I am taking classes to you, for which you have paid me 5,000 rupees. So that 5,000 rupees is the price involved in the transaction. So that price paid or payable, actually paid or payable, will be taken as the transaction value. That 5,000 rupees will be taken as the transaction value, provided two conditions are satisfied, that is assessable value or value for payment of GST equals to transaction value. Transaction value is nothing but price actually paid or payable. When value will be taken as transaction value? If two conditions are satisfied. Number one, price must be the sole consideration, means apart from price I should not be getting any other consideration, and supplier and recipient are not related. If supplier and recipient are related, or if price is not sole consideration, then transaction value will not be applicable. We need to determine the value as per CGST rules. Okay, that is this. And for this transaction value or for this value, we need to make certain inclusions. So these are the inclusions to be done. There is a supplier who is making supply of goods or service or both to the recipient, for which recipient is making some payment of supply. Okay, so supplier is making supply of goods or service or both to the recipient, for which recipient is making some payment of supply. So this payment will be taken as the transaction value. Okay, now there are totally 5 inclusions to be made. 5 inclusions to be made. If it is already included in the price, no need to add it. If it is not included in the price, you need to add. What are they? Section 15, subsection 2, clause A. All taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST. Okay. All taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST should be included in the value. Now that's the reason why. So in case of a cinema ticket, movie ticket, while computing GST, we add entertainment tax. We take the price, we add entertainment tax, and then we compute the GST. Because while computing GST, any taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called should be included. GST should be the last tax. Even that is the reason why in case of import, along with customs duty, that is after computing customs duty, while computing IGST, we add customs duty to the value and compute IGST. Okay. Then one important point that you need to understand in this context is that, suppose if the supplier pays the tax but is not recovering the tax from the recipient, should it be included in the value? Not required to be included. For example, there is a property owner of commercial property who is giving the property on rent, and the property owner paid the property tax, but he did not recover the property tax from the recipient. Should that property tax be included in the rent for payment of GST? Not required. Only when the tax is charged to the recipient, it should be included in the value. Okay. Then what about TCS? So whenever supplier collects some percentage, say 1% or 2% as TCS from the recipient under Income Tax Act, so that TCS should be included while computing the GST. No, there is a CBSE clarification related to that, which says that so TCS is an interim levy, not having the characteristic of a tax. So don't include TCS while computing GST. So generally in case of income tax, supplier will be recovering TCS from the recipient. Say for example, automobile, when it is sold to the recipient, they will be recovering some TCS. So that TCS should not be included in the value, okay, for computing GST because of the CBSE circular. So these are the points related to 15.2a. So what is 15.2a? Says all taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST should be included in the value. Then 15.2b. 15.2b is any amount that the supplier is liable to pay. Any amount that the supplier is liable to be paid, but which is paid by the recipient. So recipient incurs an expenditure on behalf of the supplier. Actually that amount is liable to be paid by whom? Supplier. But who paid it? Recipient. So it is an indirect consideration to the supplier. Therefore it should be included in the value as per section 15 subsection 2 clause B. What if it is an expenditure which is not required to be incurred by the supplier, which is to be incurred by the recipient, and recipient only incurs that expenditure? For example, so the contract is ex-factory contract. Ex-factory contract means the goods will be delivered at the factory and the price is concluded or the sale is concluded at that time, and thereafter transportation needs to be done by the recipient. So recipient arranges for the transportation. Will the transportation be included? No, because first of all it is not the liability of the supplier which is incurred by the recipient. Suppose if it is a door delivery contract and the supplier has to incur the transportation, but recipient has made the payment for the transportation, so definitely that is an indirect consideration which the supplier is getting, so therefore it should be included in the value. Or packing expenses which is to be incurred by the supplier, packing cost, but that is paid by the recipient, so again it is an indirect consideration to the supplier, therefore it should be included in the value. So any amount that the supplier is liable to pay but which is paid by the recipient should be included in the value, and if it is incurred by the recipient on his own account, it will not be included in the value. Okay, such expenditure shall be excluded from the value. Done? Got it? That is 15.2b. So 15.2a is that any amount that is any tax, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST, and 15.2b any amount that the supplier is liable to pay to government but which is paid by the recipient, so that should be included in the value. And 15.2c, incidental expenses should be included in the value. Incidental expenses which are incurred by the supplier and charged to the recipient should be included in the value, and any other expenses incurred by the supplier and charged to the recipient before or at the time of delivery of goods or supply of service also should be included in the value. So see that supplier incurs an expenditure and recovers from the recipient in the course of supply or as a pure agent on behalf of the recipient. If it is in the course of supply, such expenditure to be included in the value as per section 15.2c. Suppose if it is as a pure agent, such expenditure excluded from the value. So now first we need to check when that expenditure will be called as expenditure incurred as a pure agent. 3 points. The expenditure is not the liability of the supplier, but supplier has incurred the same. Actually that expenditure is the liability of the recipient, incurred by the supplier and recovered from the recipient as a pure agent. 3 points. Liability of the recipient, incurred by the supplier and recovered as a pure agent, then that will be called as expenditure recovered as a pure agent. A chartered accountant recovering income tax from the client is an example for this. Income tax is payable by the client, but the chartered accountant is incurring it and recovering it from the client is coming under expenditure incurred as a pure agent. In case of expenditure incurred as a pure agent, what is that we need to do? So we need to understand what is the meaning of pure agent. See, first we understood when this pure agent concept will come. So liability of the recipient incurred by the supplier and recovered from the recipient as a pure agent. What is as a pure agent? When he will become a pure agent? To become a pure agent, there are certain conditions to be followed. Number 1, there should be a contractual agreement between the supplier and recipient where supplier should be authorized by the recipient to act as a pure agent. So there should be a written agreement that recipient should authorize supplier to act as a pure agent. Number 2, supplier should recover only the actual amount incurred. So he should not make any markup. So whatever is the expenditure incurred, the same should be recovered from the recipient. Number 3, so the title. So title of goods or services, that is invoice for that goods or services so procured should not be in the name of the supplier, but it should be in the name of the recipient. And number 4, that is that goods or services so procured by the supplier is not used for his personal purpose. For example, recipient authorizes the supplier who is an architect to incur the interior decoration services, and the supplier incurs the interior decoration so by appointing an interior decorator. So now he pays some 5 lakhs to the interior decorator and he recovers only the 5 lakhs from the recipient. So then only he will become a pure agent. You understood or not? So what are the 4 conditions? Contractual agreement should be there, wherein recipient should authorize supplier to act as a pure agent. Number 2, only the actual amount incurred should be recovered. And number 3, that is supplier should not hold title to the goods or services so procured. And number 4, supplier should not use the said goods or service so procured for his personal purpose. If these four conditions are satisfied, then only supplier is acting as a pure agent of the recipient and that expenditure will not come in the value. Otherwise, it will be in the course of supply. Otherwise, it will be in the course of supply and it will be included in the value provided it is recovered before delivery of goods or supply of services. Okay, so it should be charged before delivery of goods, charged before delivery of goods or supply of services Then next, so 15.2c also over. Now 15.2d, 15.2a, all taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST. 15.2b, any amount that the supplier is liable to be paid which is paid by the recipient. 15.2c, any amount that the supplier has incurred and recovered from the recipient before delivery of goods or supply of services. Now 15.2d, interest, late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration. Supplier should receive consideration from the recipient, and when supplier receives some consideration from the recipient and he did not receive it on time, then supplier will be charging some interest or late fee or penalty. So that interest or late fee or penalty should be included in the value. And very important point is that when interest is included in the value, don't treat it as a separate supply. So don't give a separate invoice. We need to give a debit note for that purpose. And this interest, unless otherwise specified, will always be treated as inclusive of GST. Okay. This interest, whatever we have collected, unless otherwise specified, will always be treated as inclusive of GST, and therefore GST will be calculated on inclusive basis. At what rate, sir? 18 by 118? No, at the rate applicable to the original supply. For example, I sold goods to you and the goods are taxable at 12%. You did not pay money on time, so I am charging interest from you. Say the interest is 1000 rupees. That 1000 rupees will be inclusive of GST, 12%. So into 12 by 112 we should take. You understood or not? So into 12 by 112 we should take. And sir, what if there are multiple supplies, sir? ABCD, product ABCD, and ABCD is at different rates. Now I collected interest. What should I do? That interest I need to apportion between ABCD, and accordingly I need to take GST on an inclusive basis, and I need to give a debit note. Is it clear or not? And for 15.2d, definitely there will involve a debit note, and it should be always treated as inclusive of GST, usually, unless otherwise specified. Okay, so this unless otherwise specified, assume to be inclusive of GST. Unless otherwise specified, it is assumed to be inclusive of GST. Okay, so one point they may test, which is not a task, like a supplier has given an invoice. That invoice contains 4 products A, B, C, D. So A, B, C, D, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, and interest rate 12%, 5%, 18% and 28%. Like that we have different rates. Now that money is not paid on time, so because of which they are collecting interest. So how that interest will be taxable? So that interest, whatever is collected on that invoice, needs to be segregated between A, B, C, D in the value ratio. So what is that? I told you 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. In that ratio you need to segregate that interest, and with respect to each interest we need to take that respective rate, and on inclusive basis we need to calculate. So 4 interest computations will be there, and there will be four interest computations. Okay, be careful with respect to that can also be tested. And next, who gets the ITC under 15.2b? 15.2b, invoice is in whose name? That person. So usually invoice will be in the name of the supplier. Then only it will be supplier liability made by the recipient. So invoice will be in the name of the supplier, and supplier will be able to take the credit. Yes, supplier will be able to take credit. But recipient has made the payment, sir. Correct. But invoice is in the name of supplier. So supplier only will be able to take the credit. And then, sir, whether pure agent is rule 33 or rule 3? Rule 33, sorry. Rule 33. Pure agent is rule 33. Sorry, that somewhere typo it went off. So rule 33. Pure agent is rule 33. Okay. And subsidy received by the supplier. So 15.2d we completed. Then 15.2e. subsidy received by supplier. So 15(2)(a), any taxes, duties and cess by whatever name called other than GST. 15(2)(b), any amount that the supplier is liable to be paid but which is paid by the recipient should be included in the value. 15(2)(c), any incidental expenses or other expenses charged by the supplier to the recipient before delivery of goods or supply of services should be included in the value. 15(2)(d). 15(2)(d) is interest or late fee or penalty for any delay in payment of for any delay in receipt of consideration. 15(2)(d) is subsidy. 15(2)(e) is subsidy. So subsidy from other than central government or state government and directly linked to the price should be included in the value. Suppose if the subsidy is from central government or state government, it will not be included in the value. Suppose if it is from others, then we need to check whether it is directly linked to the price or not. If it is directly linked to the price, this definitely it should be included in the value. What if it is not directly linked to the price? Then it is a general subsidy, so it will not be included in the value. What is the meaning of directly linked to the price? So subsidy is given with respect to every product sold or every service rendered. Then only it will be known as directly linked to the price. For example, for every product which is sold, my holding company is giving me 2000 rupees as a subsidy. That is directly linked to the price. Irrespective of the goods sold, the holding company has given some 1 lakh rupees as a subsidy. That is general subsidy. This general subsidy should be treated like donations. This general subsidy should be treated like donations. Treated like donations. For donations, whatever is the taxability that will be applicable for this general subsidy. If it is conditional donation or unconditional donation, we need to check. If it is conditional donation, means I am getting the donation, I have an obligation to do something. It will be supply and chargeable to GST. If it is an unconditional donation, I get the money but I don't have any obligation to do anything, then that is consideration without any obligation. So it is not a supply. Okay. So depending upon that, we need to treat this general subsidy. And what is the meaning of directly linked to the price? Directly linked to price means subsidy is given for every product sold, or service rendered. Okay. And there are two views that can be taken with respect to the subsidy. The price can be after considering subsidy or the price can be without considering subsidy. So how that is going to have an impact, we will see with an illustration. Okay. We'll come back. So please provide class on questions chapter wise. Yes, I will definitely provide here. Give me some time. So I promise that I will all do. Please check the YouTube video which is posted already. So I will be providing the chapter wise questions also. Give me some time. One by one everything I will do. Okay. Fine. So please discuss circulars that we need to put more focus on while preparing. Yes, but circulars as such standalone, there are few circulars. So apart from that, few more circulars I am discussing into my discussion itself. Okay. And so this subsidy related point, say this, how section 15 subsection 2 clause E subsidy needs to be treated. Subsidy treatment. What is the treatment of subsidy? So there are two views that is possible depending upon the question. So view 1, it may be price after considering subsidy. Price after considering subsidy. Price after considering subsidy means subsidy is reduced from the given price. So there is some price. From that price they have reduced the subsidy and the given price is after reducing that subsidy. Price after considering subsidy. Price after considering subsidy means subsidy is reduced from the price already. Whereas another view is that price without considering subsidy. Price without considering subsidy means subsidy is not yet reduced. Subsidy is an income. Subsidy being an income, whether you reduced it from the given price or not, we need to check. So price without considering subsidy. If price is without considering subsidy, then subsidy is not reduced from the given price. So what we need to do is that we need to just take the price. We need to take the price. So what is the price? Say 10,000 rupees. And we have subsidy from an NGO. Subsidy from an NGO. Subsidy from an NGO. So subsidy from an NGO is other than government, central government or state government, and it is directly linked to the price. So subsidy from an NGO rupees 2000. What is the treatment of this? If the price is after considering subsidy, this 2000 rupees is already reduced while arriving at the given price of 10,000 rupees, and subsidy from NGO is to be included in the given price, it is excluded, so we will add subsidy from NGO is to be included as per the provision, because it is from other than central government or state government directly linked to the price, so it is to be included in the value. In the given case it is excluded, so we are adding 2000 rupees. And then view 2, subsidy from an NGO. Suppose if it is view 2, in the question they did not give that price is after considering the subsidy, and it is given that price is without considering the subsidy, then what we need to do? So this 2000 rupees is to be included in the given price. We have not deducted it, means it is already included, so ignore. Okay. And then next point, subsidy from central government, and that is say rupees 3000, it is to be excluded. Subsidy from central government is to be excluded, and 3000 rupees. View 1, in the given price already it is excluded, it is to be excluded. In the given price it is already excluded, so you need to ignore. View 2, in the given price it is not excluded and it is to be excluded, so we will deduct. What is that? 3000 rupees we will deduct. Like that we will have a different treatment when you take the assumption. So now the value will be, in this case the value will be 12,000, whereas in this case the value will be 7,000. Okay, why this difference arises is mainly because of this assumption. And now when the question is silent, which should be taken? So ICI has taken in many times, many questions they have taken this view only. ICAI view, if question is silent, we need to take view 1. Okay, so in many questions institute has taken the same view, that the given price is after considering the subsidy. Okay, when the question is silent, when the question specifically says something, you will follow accordingly, but when the question is silent, you need to take price after considering the subsidy. That's what I have given. When question is silent, assume that price given is after deducting subsidy, as subsidy is an income to the supplier. Okay, then next, conditions for pure agent already we discussed. There is one circular related to passenger service fee and user development fee. What is this circular about? So generally this airline operators will be paying passenger service fee and user development fee to airline, that is airport operator. Airline operator will be paying it to the airport operator. For example, Airway Authority of India, you take AAI. Now there is an airline operator, Indigo Airlines. So Indigo Airlines will be collecting this passenger service fee and user development fee from the passengers, and they will be remitting it to the Airport Authority of India. Actually, this amount is liable to be paid by the passenger to the Airport Authority of India, because Airport Authority of India is giving access of airport to the passenger, for which the passenger has to pay user development fee or passenger service fee, but which is not practically payable by the passenger, so which is paid by the airline operator, say Indigo Airlines or SpiceJet, etc. at the time of booking tickets. So they will pay and they will in turn recover it from the recipient. Whether this passenger service fee, PSF, and user development fee will come under expenditure incurred as a pure agent. Yes, it will come under expenditure incurred as a pure agent, and it should be excluded while arriving at the value. So passenger service fee and user development fee collected by airline operator from the passenger are to be remitted to the airport operator and falls under expenditure incurred as a pure agent, so that should not be taken into value for computing GST by the airline operator, that is Indigo Airlines or SpiceJet, etc. Then next, exclusions from the value. What are to be excluded from the value as per section 15 subsection 3 of CGST Act? That is, so far what we have seen is 5 inclusions. So section 15 subsection 1, meaning of value, transaction value. Section 15 subsection 2, 5 inclusions. Section 15 subsection 3, exclusions. So only one exclusion, that is discount. So discount can be given before or at the time of supply and it is duly accounted in the invoice. So then we don't have to pay any GST on that. Whereas if the discount is given after supply, but the terms and conditions are agreed before or at the time of supply, example cash discount. In that case, we need to give a credit note to the recipient and for passing on that cash discount, and whatever is the liability that is reported in the credit note, to that extent it will come down. Okay. So allowed as deduction, credit note shall be issued and recipient should reverse the proportionate ITC. So for example, 10,000 rupees is the value and 12% is the rate of GST. So 1,200 rupees will be taken as the GST. Now there is a 10% discount. So 10% discount, cash discount we are giving for example. Then 1,000 rupees we are giving as a cash discount and 120 rupees is the GST component. So for 1,120 we need to give a credit note to the recipient, and when 1,120 credit note we will give, 120 rupees our liability will come down in the month in which credit note is reported, and the recipient will be reversing the ITC. Already he would have taken ITC on 1,200. Now he need to reverse to the extent of 120 rupees. Okay. So this is what we need to do. If it is discount given after supply but the terms and conditions are agreed before or at the time of supply. What if discount is given after supply and the terms and conditions are not agreed before or at the time of supply? Then credit note cannot be issued. This discount is not allowed as a deduction. Example, end of season sale discount. So this discount is not allowed as a deduction and GST payable on the value before discount, and credit note cannot be issued in this case. Understood? So these are the 3 points related to discount here. Then whether GST is payable on the penal interest that is involved in non-payment of a installment. Now we need to check what type of transaction it is. Is it a hire purchase transaction or it is a hire purchase financing? In hire purchase transaction, there are two parties. So who are those two parties? Hire vendor and the hire purchaser. The hire purchaser will be paying EMIs to the hire vendor. Now in that EMIs, there is interest component na. That interest component will be treated as value included in the value of supply and chargeable to GST as per section 15(2)(d). And in case of interest, the time of supply is at the time of receipt of the interest. So what we need to do in a hire purchase transaction, we need to take the EMIs, and in that EMIs we need to bifurcate it into principal and interest. So principal will be taxable at the beginning itself when the transaction takes place. For example, I have a car and that car I am giving it to you on a hire purchase basis. Now you are making payment in installments. Say the installments, the car value is 4 lakhs and you are paying 15,000 rupees each for a period of 15,000 for a period of 36 months. 15,000 for a period of 36 months, that is 5,40,000. Car price is 4 lakhs. So now 4 lakhs GST is payable at the time of sale of car. That is the time of supply. Whereas interest component is there. What is that interest component? 5,40,000 you are paying for 4 lakhs car. So 5,40,000 minus 4 lakhs, that comes to 1,40,000 is the interest component. That interest component is not taxed all at a time. So every month I will receive an installment. In that installment there is an interest component. On that interest component I need to pay GST on an inclusive basis. Okay. This is in case of a hire purchase transaction. Whereas in a hire purchase financing, so I will not be giving the finance to you. So there will be a third party financier. He will give the financing. I will get my 4 lakh rupees on which I will pay GST. Now interest I will not get, that financier will get. Whether the financier has to pay interest, GST on interest, no. Interest on loans, advances or deposits is exempted. So whatever interest that the financier is collecting, he is not required to pay any GST on that interest component. Which means there is no GST on interest. Yes, there is no GST on interest. If it is a hire purchase transaction, yes, there will be GST payable on interest. Why like that? Because in a hire purchase transaction, that interest will come under interest on account of delay in receipt of consideration. So that will be included in the value. But if it is hire purchase financing, interest on loans, advances or deposits will be exempted. Now, if there is non-payment of a particular installment, I will be levying some interest. if it is hire purchase transaction, as the main interest is taxable, even this interest on overdue loan amount is also taxable. Whereas in case of hire purchase financing, normal loan transactions, as the interest is exempted, so on account of non-payment of EMI, if there is any interest that is levied, that interest is also exempted. Okay, that is this. As interest is exempted, penal interest is also exempted. Here as interest is taxable, penal interest is also taxable. So this is one circular related to taxability of the interest. Okay. And interest will come in two places here. Interest on loans, advances, deposits is exempted, whereas interest on account of delay in receipt of consideration, that interest should be included in the value and chargeable to GST accordingly. Okay. Then, so with this, section 15 is over. Section 15 we completed. Now we are moving on to rules. CGST rules related to valuation. The CGST rules related to valuation, we have rule 27 to rule 32. Rule 27 to rule 31, and we have rule 32 also. That is in case of some 5 special transactions, how to determine the value. Okay. First we are taking with rule 27. When is it applicable? When price is not sole consideration. Price must be sole consideration is one of the condition for application of transaction value. If price is not sole consideration, then rule 27 will be applicable. And then rule 28 is in case of related party transactions, including transaction between distinct persons. That is, one of the condition for application of transaction value is that supplier and recipient should not be related. What if they are related? Then rule 28 will be applicable. Then in case of transaction between distinct persons, who are distinct person? So one registration of a person to another registration of a person. So when there are multiple places of business under the same permanent account number in different states, each such place they need to get a separate registration. So one registration of a person to the other registration is known as distinct person. Transaction between distinct person, if it is for consideration, we can definitely apply transaction value, but section 15 subsection 5 clearly says that with respect to some notified activities, if there is any value that is prescribed, we need to follow that value only. So therefore, if it is distinct persons, even though transaction value is possible, but we will not apply transaction value, we will apply rule 28 only. Same way, in case of principal agent transaction, even though transaction value is applicable, but we will not apply transaction value, we will be determining the value as per rule 29 only. So this 27, 28, 29 are the notified values. So we need to follow this only. Got it? Even if transaction value is applicable. Sir, where is it given? It is given in section 15 subsection 5. So rule 27, when price is not sole consideration. 28, transaction between related parties or distinct person. 29, principal agent transaction. So in case of rule 27, what we need to do? So first we need to take the open market value. So there is a priority which we need to follow strictly. First we will take open market value. Open market value if not available, then we will take money received plus money value of additional consideration. If that is also not available, then we will be taking like, kind and quality. And if that is also not available, then cost plus 10%. So what is the meaning of this open market value and like, kind and quality? There is a difference. So let's take an example to understand that I am selling a TV, and that TV is a new model which is one of its kind and recently launched model. I am a dealer. I am selling one TV and you gave me your old TV in exchange. So price is not the sole consideration, which means consideration is partly in money and partly in some other form. That is only the meaning of price is not sole consideration. So means there is consideration, but the consideration is partly in money and partly in other form, or the consideration is in non-monetary form. Then only you will be applying rule 27. So in this example, so partly in cash and partly in some other form. Therefore, price is not sole consideration. We need to apply rule 27. So what we need to do? Take the open market value. What is the price at which this TV is sold today between two unrelated parties? So that should be taken. Same supplier or any other supplier, it's okay. Same supplier or any other supplier, same day, what is the price at which this TV is being sold? That will be taken as an open market value. If open market value is not ascertainable, money received, say I received 20,000 rupees plus old TV. So money received 20,000 plus I need to do the valuation of the old TV. Say the value of the old TV is at 10,000, then 30,000 will be taken as the value of the new TV sold. Suppose if that is also not available, say the value of old TV is not ascertainable, then like kind and quality. Like kind and quality means any other supply. So this need not be the same day, any nearest day, this kind of TV I would have sold and that value will be taken. That is known as like kind and quality. Suppose if like kind and quality is also not ascertainable, it's a newly launched TV, so such kind of TV I have not sold, then in that case we will take cost plus 10%. What is the meaning of cost? In case of manufacturer, cost of production; in case of a trader, cost of acquisition; in case of a service provider, cost of providing the service plus 10%. I am what? Dealer. Dealer means trader, so I need to take the cost of purchase. What is the price at which I am purchasing? Plus 10% will be taken. If that is also not ascertainable, then I need to determine the value by applying some principles of costing, that is known as residual value, rule 31. That is known as residual value, rule 31. Okay. If above is not possible, then value shall be determined as per rule 31, and this residual value will be determined by the GST officer. This is only what we call as provisional assessment. This is what we call as provisional assessment. So when we are unable to determine the value, we can make application for provisional assessment. That is this. Okay. So this is with respect to this 4 points. So when price is not sold consideration, first open market value. Then if open market value is not ascertainable, money received plus money value of additional consideration. If that is also not ascertainable, that is money value of additional consideration is not ascertainable, like kind and quality. If like kind and quality is not ascertainable, cost plus 10%. If that is also not possible, then we go for rule 31, residual value. Okay. And what is the difference between OMV and LKQ? I have given in the next page, page number 29. Have a look into that. OMV and LKQ, the basic difference is the timing. Comparable time, same date, if you can ascertain the value, that is OMV. Nearest date, that is known as like kind and quality. Comparable value, that is OMV should be some other transaction value, but LKQ can be some other value, that can be transaction value or value determined under rules also. Okay. Whereas comparable supplier, same supplier or any other supplier. OMV can be same supplier or any other supplier on the same date, whereas LKQ is same supplier. And then what about the goods? Comparable goods. In case of OMV, same goods, identical, same goods, whereas in case of LKQ need not be same goods, minor modifications permissible, not exactly same, slight changes is there, it's okay. Minor differences acceptable in case of LKQ. So this is the difference between OMV and LKQ. So first we will apply OMV. If OMV fails, then only we go for LKQ, like kind and quality. So mainly that will arise when on the same day the value cannot be ascertained, we go for like kind and quality. But remember, between these two there is one more, money received plus money value of non-monetary consideration. And should we follow this order, sir? Yes, we need to follow this order. 1, 2, 3, 4, this order needs to be followed. Okay. Then second case, related party transactions including transaction between distinct persons. So what is that we need to do? First point is OMV, open market value. Here open market value, we have got a relaxation. If recipient is eligible for full ITC, if recipient is eligible for full ITC, then the transaction value declared in the invoice is deemed to be open market value. Even if 1 rupee invoice we raise, that also will be deemed as open market value. So when recipient is eligible for full ITC, I am making sale to you. What you are doing? In turn, you are making taxable supply. Then on my supply to you, this is an inward supply to you and you can take full ITC, correct or not? Again I am repeating, I am making supply to you. You in turn making supply to some other person. When you are making supply to some other person, that is taxable, which means you can take ITC on your inward supply. Full ITC you can take on your inward supply. So then what is the price at which I am selling to you? Whatever transaction value I declared in the invoice, that will be taken as the open market value. Suppose if your outward supply is partly taxable, partly exempted, and you are using this inward supply from me for partly taxable, partly exempted, means you are not eligible for full ITC. When you are not eligible for full ITC, in that case, so we cannot take this assumption that open market value deemed as transaction value. We need to determine the open market value separately. Understood? And suppose if this fails, then LKQ. If LKQ files, cost plus 10%. So what is missing is this money received plus money value of non-monetary consideration is missing. So we need to take immediately after OMV, we need to take LKQ, then cost plus 10%. Or alternatively, you don't have to follow this at all. You don't have to follow this OMV LKQ cost plus 10% at all. Alternatively, you can take 90% of the resale price. So the resale price method. So the price at which that related person or distinct person subsequently sells to an unrelated buyer, take that price, multiply with 90%, that will be taken. But importantly, that person who is subsequently selling should not process and sell, he should be selling it as such. He should not process it and sell. Then only 90% will be taken. So the assumption is that that subsequent person will be adding 10%. That is the assumption here. Alternatively, in case of goods, and also this is applicable only in case of goods. This alternative is applicable only in case of goods and with respect to each supply at the option of the supplier. Means for each invoice they can decide whether to go for OMV, LKQ or cost plus 10% or this alternative rule, that is 90% of the resale price. The price at which 90% of the price at which recipient supplies like kind and quality goods to an unrelated buyer on the same day, and recipient should not process those goods but should have been sold it as such. Okay. So this is about rule 28. And rule 28, remember this alternative is applicable only in case of goods. So rule 27 is applicable for both goods and services, yes. Rule 28 also applicable for both goods and services, yes. Including this deemed, yes. Recipient eligible for full ITC, yes. But this 90% of resale price alone is not applicable in case of services. It's applicable only in case of goods. Then point number 3, third case, rule 29, principal agent transactions. In case of transactions between principal and an agent, okay, where agent is making supply on behalf of principal, now we need to take open market value or 90% of the resale price at the option of the supplier. So principal can take either open market value of the goods which are sold to the agent or 90% of the resale price, 90% of the resale price of the agent can be taken, okay, at the option of the supplier. If both are not ascertainable, then cost plus 10%. Okay. And wherever this cost plus 10% is there, remember, if that person is a manufacturer, cost of production. If that person is a trader, cost of acquisition. If that person is a service provider, cost of providing the service. Okay. And if nothing is applicable, then only we go for rule 31. And then, in case when open market value is deemed as transaction value, so invoice can be generated for any value, even ₹1 can be considered as value. Don't put 0. For 0 you cannot generate an invoice. At least ₹1 should be there. And in case of services, practically speaking, it will be difficult in case of services to generate the determine the cost of providing the service. In case of services, it is very difficult to determine the cost of providing the service. So that's why in that case, you can take cost plus 10%. Is difficult. So you can jump to rule 31 from rule 29 or rule 28. Rule 29 is applicable only in case of goods here. Rule 29 is applicable only in case of goods, not in case of services. So what is that I am telling? So in case when rule 30 is applied, for services it will be difficult. So we can skip rule 30 and directly go to rule 31. Okay. So this one page, if you remember, that is sufficient for rule 27 to rule 31. And thereafter, we have GST implications on debit note and credit note. So debit note comes under GST because of valuation, because of interest. And credit note will come into picture because of the cash discount or any discount that we are giving after supply, post-supply discount. So the provisions related to debit note and credit note is given under section 34 of CGST Act. And when this debit note and credit note will be given? So supplier only will be giving debit note or credit note to the recipient under GST. Under GST, recipient giving debit note or credit note to the supplier is not there. Under GST, supplier giving debit note or credit note to the recipient is only there. When this debit note or credit note will be given? If supplier actually shows recipient as debtor in the supplier's books. When the debtor balance increases, debit note. When the debtor balance decreases, then it will be credit note. Okay, so supplier will be raising the debit note to the recipient when debit balance increases. So when the debit balance means when invoice value increases, already we prepared an invoice, now the invoice value increases, the recipient will be making a debit. For example, already you sold goods to him, so therefore the entry will be the recipient account debit to sales 10,000 rupees, to GST payable, so 1,200 rupees. Now what happened, you are collecting some interest. When you are collecting some interest, say 1,000 rupees you are collecting as interest, in that case again recipient account debit to interest earned, correct, to interest earned, so that's an income, on to GST payable, so therefore again you are making a debit to him, so give a debit note. Now when you give a discount, first you made a sale 10,000, 1,200 rupees, so recipient account debit to sales 10,000, to GST payable 1,200. Now you are reducing the recipient because you are offering a discount, so discount allowed account debit, GST payable account debit, so your liability will come down to recipient, so which means you are giving a credit note to the recipient whenever you pass on the benefit. Okay, so invoice value increases debit note, invoice value decreases credit note. So recipient has to pay an amount beyond the invoice price, recipient has to pay an amount less than the invoice price, debit note and credit note. Who will be giving it to whom? Supplier only will be giving it to recipient. Is there any time limit? No, there is no time limit for debit note, but there is a time limit for credit note. What is the time limit? 30th September of the succeeding financial year. For this year, say for financial year 2021-22, for financial year 2021-22, the credit note to be issued by 30th September of the succeeding financial year, that is 30th September of next financial year or date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier should be taken. 30th September of next financial year or date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier, will be taken as the time limit for the purpose of issuance of credit note. Okay. And what is the consequence to the supplier? So if debit note is given, supplier's liability will increase. And what supplier should do? Supplier should report it in GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B, they need to add the liability. What will be the consequence to the recipient because of debit note? Recipient will be able to take that ITC in the debit note, GST paid whatever is there, that will be taken as ITC by the recipient in GSTR 3B. Simple. Then what will happen because of credit note to the supplier? Supplier's liability will decrease and they need to report that in GSTR 1 and in GSTR 3B, whatever is the liability net of credit note liability, they will take in 3B and they will pay. Whereas what will happen to the recipient? Recipient's ITC balance will come down. If there is no sufficient balance in ITC, the liability will increase to the recipient. What recipient should do? Simply reverse the ITC in the GSTR 3B. So this is the treatment to be followed in case of debit note and credit note. And then we have rule 32. We have rule 31A also. That rule 31A is in case of lottery, betting and gambling transactions. So here we have one important point. In case of lottery tickets, the rate is only 28%. Previously we had 12% like that and all. So it is only 28%. So we need to take face value of the ticket or price notified by the organizing state, whichever is higher. Okay. So generally face value of the ticket and price notified by the organizing state is lower. So we will take face value. If price notified by the organizing state is higher, we will take whichever is higher, price notified by the organizing state. Into 28 by 128 is the GST. Means into 100 by 128 is the value. Okay. Whereas in case of betting transactions also rate of GST is 28%. But we need to compute GST on the total bet value. But Karnataka High Court has given a contrary decision, but that is not applicable for your exam. So for your exam, GST payable on betting transaction on the total bet value. So not from the winnings, not on the winnings, total amount paid by, so winner as well as loser, both of them will be paying some amount into the totalizer na. On the total bet value, GST is payable at the rate of 28%. 100% of the face value of the bet or the amount paid into the totalizer, not on the commission earned by the totalizer. Okay. So this is in case of rule 31A of CGST rules. and 30, 27 price is not sole consideration, 28 related party transaction including distinct persons, and 29 principal agent transaction, 30 cost plus 10%, 31 residual value, 31A lottery and betting. 32 is there are 5 special cases wherein 5 transactions. In case of these 5 transactions, either you can follow transaction value or value determined under rule 32. So a simplified valuation methodology is given, but this rule 32 is optional, not mandatory. So this rule 32 is optional only, not mandatory. So therefore they can decide between transaction value under section 15 or rule 32. They can decide. Is it clear or not? So therefore, with respect to each invoice, so with respect to each supply, okay, we can choose between transaction value under section 15 or value under rule 32. Is it clear or not? So with respect to each supply, we can either choose between transaction value under section 15 or value under rule 32, because value under rule 32 is a optional valuation only. You can go for transaction value also, and this optional value that is applicable. It's a simplified method of arriving at the value, and this is applicable mainly in case of 5 transactions. What are they? Foreign exchange transactions including money changing, and number 2, that is air travel agent. Number 3, life insurance business. Number 4, second hand dealer in goods. Number 5, vouchers. So in these 5 cases only this rule 32 is applicable. Forex transactions including money changing, that is exchange of currencies, one currency to another currency. Now in case of foreign exchange transactions under rule 32, so we have a general transaction value. What will be taken as a transaction value? We will take the markup fee will be taken as a transaction value. So whenever a foreign exchange transaction takes place, a currency markup fee will be charged by the person who do the transaction. So that currency markup fee will be taken as a transaction value, or alternatively they can go for this rule 32 also. In rule 32 again 2 options are available for them. So rule 32 sub rule 2A, rule 32 sub rule 2B. Option 1 rule 32 sub rule 2A, and option 2 rule 32 sub rule 2B. Option 1 rule 32 sub rule 2A, and option 2 rule 32 sub rule 2B. So what is this rule 32 sub rule 2A? If one of the currency exchange involves Indian rupee or not, we need to check. If one of the currency exchange involves Indian rupee, then bid rate or ask rate and RBI reference rate, the difference between bid or ask rate and the RBI reference rate into units of currency will be taken. So for example, we are just discussing illustrations on rule 32 sub rule 2A. On rule 32 sub rule 2A and rule 32 sub rule 2B. Okay, so what is it we need to do in this case? So first we need to take, in case of rule 32 sub rule 2A, so what we need to do, we need to take one of the currency exchange involves Indian rupee or not. Say rupee per dollar 73 and 76. So 73 is known as bid and 76 is known as ask. So bank dollar buying rate, bank dollar selling rate. So with this will be taken as the exchange rate, any one rate depending upon the transaction. Say Mr. A sold $10,000. Mr. A sold $10,000. Okay, and RBI reference rate is rupees 75 per dollar. So what we need to do, when A is selling $10,000, then what bank is doing? Bank is purchasing. So 73 will be taken as the relevant rate. So 73 and 75, what is the difference? So 2 rupees. Therefore value under rule 32 sub rule 2A equals to, so 2 rupees per dollar into how many dollars? $10,000. So that equals to rupees 20,000 will be taken as the value. Is it clear or not? that is bid rate or ask rate depending upon the transaction. Okay, so buying rate or selling rate depending upon the transaction, and RBI reference rate, and into units of currency. How much is the units? $10,000. So therefore that will be taken as the value. This is under Rule 32 sub Rule 2A. And what if RBI reference rate is not available? What if RBI reference rate not available? If RBI reference rate not available, if RBI reference rate is not available, what we need to do? So we need to take the gross amount exchanged in Indian rupees. So what is the transaction value? 10,000 rupees into rupees 73 per dollar is the transaction rate, correct or not? Multiply with 1%. So 1% of the gross amount exchanged in Indian rupees will be taken. So 10,000 into 73 into 1%. So 7,300 will be taken as the value. Sir, compared to this is only better, na sir? Yes. So then, can we do something here? No, it all depends upon RBI reference rate, whether RBI reference rate is available for that day or not. If RBI reference rate is not available for that day, we need to take the gross amount involved in Indian rupees into 1%. 7,300 rupees will be taken as the value in this case. Okay, this is in case of Rule 32 sub Rule 2A here. So value under Rule 32 sub Rule 2A. Okay, when both the currencies exchange involves Indian rupees, when both the currencies exchange involves foreign currency. When one of the currency exchange involves Indian rupee, we will follow this. When both the currencies exchange involves foreign currency, what we should do? For example, so $10,000 converted to £6,000. Okay, so now you need to convert this $10,000 into Indian rupees and 6,000 pounds into Indian rupees using the RBI reference rate. So what is the RBI reference rate you need to take? So the RBI reference rate is, say, rupees 75 per dollar and rupees 120 per pound. Okay, so convert it into Indian rupees and multiply with 1%. Multiply with 1% and see whichever is lower. See whichever is lower. That whichever is lower will be taken as the value. Therefore, value under Rule 32 sub Rule 2A equals to. So see this. What will be taken? 10,000 into 75 into 1%, that is 7,500. Whereas here 6,000 pounds into 120 into 1%, so 7,200. Whichever is lower will be 7,200 will be taken as a value as per Rule 32 sub Rule 2A. Now, when this Rule 32 sub Rule 2A fails, you cannot determine Rule 32 sub Rule 2A at all. That is, when RBI reference rate is not available, when both the currencies exchange involves foreign currency. So in this case, what is the heart of this calculation is the RBI reference rate. When RBI reference rate is not available, we don't have Rule 32 sub Rule 2A. Then what we need to do? We need to go for transaction value only. Okay. Then next, Rule 32 sub Rule 2B. Rule 32 sub Rule 2B is like a slab rate model. So what is that slab rate? So first we need to see gross amount up to 1 lakh. If gross amount is up to 1 lakh, then we will take 1% of the gross amount or 250 rupees, whichever is higher. So minimum should be 250 rupees. When the gross amount exceeds 1 lakh, exactly when the gross amount is 1 lakh. Okay. So let's see what will happen. So here it is depending upon the gross amount. So value under Rule 32 sub Rule 2B. So we need to take the gross amount in Indian rupees. We need to take gross amount in Indian rupees. What is that gross amount in Indian rupees? We need to determine. Depending upon that only it will change. Suppose if the gross amount in Indian rupees is 10,000 rupees. Okay, 10,000 rupees. What will be taken as the value here? What will be taken as the value? So 10,000 into 1%. 10,000 into 1% is what? 100 or 250, whichever is higher. Whichever is higher, that is 250 rupees will be taken. Suppose if it is, say, 80,000. If it is 80,000. So again 80,000 into 1% 80,000 into 1% equals to 800 or 250, whichever is higher. So therefore that will come to 800. Exactly if it is 1 lakh. Exactly if it is 1 lakh, then what we will do? We will take 1 lakh into 1%. 1 lakh into 1% will be 1000. So 1000 or 250, whichever is higher, so that will be 1000 will be taken as the value. Understood? Now when you are going into the next slab, now still we are in the first slab. Now when you are going into the next slab, say 2,50,000, when you are going into the second slab. So up to 1 lakh is the first slab and thereafter second slab, 2,50,000. Already you are crossing the first slab, so there will be 1000 fixed. Plus, what is the amount exceeding 1 lakh? That is 1,50,000. For that amount exceeding 1 lakh, 0.5% will be taken. So 1,50,000 into 0.5%, that is 750 will be taken. So therefore 1,750 will become value. Okay. Then suppose if it is 8,90,000. 8,90,000. So first 1 lakh 1,000 fixed, plus thereafter, so 7,90,000. 7,90,000 into 0.5%. 7,90,000 into 0.5%. So 3,950. So 3,950 plus 1,000 is 4,950 will be taken. Okay. And exactly 10 lakhs. When it is exactly 10 lakhs, what we need to do? When it is exactly 10 lakhs, first 1 lakh 1,000. And thereafter on the amount exceeding 1 lakh, that is 9 lakhs. 9 lakhs into 0.5%, that is 4,500. So therefore 4,500 plus 1,000, that is 5,500 will be taken. So when you are crossing the 10 lakh slab, so you are in the third slab. You are in the third slab. So when you are crossing 10 lakhs, say it is 18,50,000, and then there will be a fixed amount. What is that fixed amount? 5,500 plus. On an amount exceeding 10 lakhs, we need to take 1%, 0.1%. So that is 8,50,000 on an amount exceeding 10 lakhs, because for 10 lakhs it is 5,500. So 8,50,000 into 0.1%, and this is subject to maximum. This is subject to maximum 60,000 rupees. Subject to maximum 60,000 rupees. So now you see how much it comes to. 8,50,000 into 0.1% is what? 850. 850 plus 5,500, that comes to 6,350. 6,350. Even if you take this as somewhere 450 lakhs, 450 lakhs, so then for 10 lakhs it is 5,500 and plus 440 lakhs. 440 lakhs into 0.1%, subject to maximum 60,000. Okay. So that is equals to 440 lakhs into 0.1%, 44,000. 44,000 plus 5,500, also 49,500. So when the transaction goes beyond that, only the maximum 60,000 will be applicable. Okay. So this should be taken as the slab rate model with respect to this. And remember, with respect to each transaction you calculate. Suppose if there are 100 transactions, don't calculate. So directly for 100 transactions, for each transaction you calculate and then multiply with 100. Okay. So this should be calculated with respect to each transaction. And when option 2 will fail? Option 2 will fail when both the currencies exchanged are foreign currencies. In that case, we need to take transaction value only. Okay. So option 2 will fail in that case. And this option, either 32(2)(a) or 32(2)(b) to be decided in the beginning of the financial year, and which shall be applicable throughout the financial year. So between 32(2)(a) to B, you cannot shift invoice wise. So that should be once in the beginning of the financial year. But between transaction value and 32, you can decide each invoice. You can decide each invoice. But between 32(2)(a) and 32(2)(b, once in the financial year, you need to follow any one as standard. Okay. And wherever value cannot be determined under rule 32 sub rule 2, note, if value cannot be determined under, under rule 32 sub rule 2, then value shall be determined under section 15. Value shall be determined under section 15. Okay, so we need to take section 15 transaction value and we need to apply, because transaction value is with respect to each invoice. Okay, then next, rule 32 sub rule 3, air travel agent. In case of air travel agent, we need to take base fare. We need to take base fare and 5% of that base fare in case of domestic bookings and 10% of the base fare in case of international bookings. So you need to remember these percentages, don't forget. That is, first, what is base fare? Out of the entire ticket, so there will be a basic amount plus fuel surcharge plus taxes and other charges. So you need to take the base fare. So the first part, base fare, into 5% in case of domestic bookings, into 10% in case of international bookings. This is the value in case of an air travel agent. Otherwise, what will be the transaction value? The commission that he earns will be taken as the transaction value. Then life insurance business. Life insurance business, risk cover policies, this rule is not applicable. So always transaction value, that is premium received, will be taken as the transaction value. So in risk cover policy, entire premium will be taken as the value. Whereas in single premium annuity policy, there will be only one premium that we will pay, and that premium only reinvested towards the annual premium. So in that case, for the single premium, 10% of the single premium will be taken as the value. And in case of reinvestment policy where amount allocated for investment is communicated to the policy holder, then we will take gross premium, how much ever is the premium received minus amount allocated for investment will be taken. Suppose if it is not communicated to the policy holder, say we are collecting premium and we are telling 90% of the premium will be invested in the equity. Suppose if we are not telling that as to what it will be done, but it is up to us as to wherever we want to invest, we can invest. In that case, so as the information is not given to the policy holder, we will be taking it as like normal policies. In case of normal policies, what will be taken as the value? So if it is first year premium means this year only they have taken the policy. So with respect to the first year premium, we will be taking 25% of the premium as the value, and in case of subsequent premium, we will be taking it as 12.5%. Okay. So with respect to the first year premium, 25%, and with respect to the subsequent year premium, 12.5%. What is subsequent year premium? Policy already taken in the previous years for which the premium is paid this year is known as subsequent year premiums. And this year policy they have taken, this year they paid the premium, that is first year premium. With respect to first year premium, 25%, with respect to subsequent year premium, 12.5% will be taken. Okay. But remember, when the amount allocated to investment is towards the investment is not communicated to the policy holders, it should be treated like other policies only. That is a special point in this. Then rule 32 sub rule 5 is applicable for a second hand dealer in goods. They are purchasing second hand goods, they are selling second hand goods. Suppose if I purchase new goods and if I sell it as a second hand goods, so that will not be coming under rule 32 sub rule 5. Okay. Rule 32 sub rule 2 is foreign exchange transaction, rule 32 sub rule 3 is air travel agent, and rule 32 sub rule 4 is insurance business, life insurance business. Rule 32 sub rule 5 is second hand dealer in goods. So in case of second hand dealer in goods, their purchases should be second hand goods, their sales should be second hand goods. In that case, they are eligible for a margin scheme. What is margin scheme? They don't have to pay GST on the entire sale value. So they can pay GST on the sale price minus purchase price. Only on the value addition they can pay GST. For example, I am a second hand dealer in cars. I purchase a car for 1,50,000. I am selling at 2,50,000. If this margin scheme is not applicable to me, I need to pay GST on 2,50,000. If the margin scheme is applicable to me, 2,50,000 minus 1,50,000, I need to pay GST only on 1 lakh, so that the cost to the buyer will come down. For example, if 18% is the rate of GST, so 2,50,000 plus 18%, so 2,95,000 will be the cost to the buyer if margin scheme is not applicable to me. Suppose if margin scheme is applicable to me, I need to pay GST only on 1 lakh. So 1 lakh into 18%, 18,000. So 2,50,000 plus 18,000, that is 2,68,000. So from 2,95,000 it has been come down to 2,68,000. That is the advantage of margin scheme. And one more advantage is there in margin scheme, that is if the sale price is less than purchase price, I don't have to pay any GST. For example, I purchased a car at 2 lakhs and because the model is outdated, I sold at 1,80,000 rupees. Now I don't have to pay any GST. If I am not going for margin scheme, I need to pay GST on that 1,80,000 rupees. So that is the advantage, okay. So value equals to selling price minus purchase price, that is margin scheme, okay. Ignore if it is negative. Ignore the value if it is negative. If it is negative, ignore the value. Means how the value can be negative. So no need to pay any GST in that case. Okay. And ITC should not be availed on purchase. That's an important point. If you enjoy the ITC, then margin scheme is not applicable. Then in case of repossessed goods which are disposed of. For example, some financiers will be repossessing the goods and on which installments were not paid. And these repossessed goods will be disposed of. When they dispose it off, can they go for margin scheme? Yes, they can go for margin scheme. Then sale price is the price at which they dispose it off, but purchase price cannot be ascertained because they repossessed it. They did not buy it, they repossessed it. So then what should be taken as the purchase price? Original purchase price to the defaulting borrower. So the defaulting borrower would have purchased at original purchase price, now take that and you give a depreciation of 5% for every quarter or part thereof from the date of purchase till the date of disposal of that repossessed asset. Okay. So depreciation will be calculated 5% for every quarter or part thereof, because see, original purchase price is for new asset, but when we repossess it is not the new asset, it is the depreciated asset. So therefore we need to deduct, and we also keep for some days till the time we dispose it off. So therefore original purchase price as reduced by 5% for every quarter or part thereof from the date of purchase till the date of disposal of that repossessed asset. If you reduce, you will get the purchase price. So that is a depreciated value. So sale price minus purchase price, that will be taken as the margin in this case. This is in case of second hand dealer in goods. Then in case of coupons or vouchers, what will be taken as the value in case of coupons or vouchers? See, generally in case of identifiable vouchers you take, at the time of issuance of voucher will be taken as the time of supply. For example, you are going to one shopper stop, and as you make a purchase in that shopper stop gives you a voucher. That voucher is, redeeming that voucher you will get one perfume bottle. Okay, so now you can redeem it against only the perfume bottle, so it is an identifiable voucher. Now what will be taken as the time of supply for this voucher? At the time of issuance of voucher, what will be taken as a value on which GST payable? What is the value of the perfume bottle? That will be taken as a value. So the redeemable value of that voucher will be taken as the value of the voucher. Money value of supplies. So what is the value of perfume? Money value of supplies. Redeemable against such voucher will be taken. So that perfume bottle price will be taken as the value in this case. That is in case of coupon or voucher here. Then Rule 32 sub rule 7. There are some notified services. These notified services are made between distinct persons. In that case, the value should be taken as nil. But unfortunately, the services are not yet notified for the purpose of Rule 32 sub rule 7. So therefore, it is not applicable at present. So this Rule 32 sub rule 7 is not applicable at present. We have only up to vouchers. Okay. So this is about Rule 32. In 5 cases, we have a simplified method of valuation which we need to follow. Okay. And Rule 33 we completed, pure agent. What is Rule 34? Rule 34 is what will be taken as the relevant exchange rate. What will be taken as the relevant exchange rate? So you look it into page number 32. Look into it in page number 32. What will be taken as the relevant exchange rate? See, in case of transaction, that is invoices which are denominated in foreign currency, either in case of import or in case of export, we need to convert it into Indian rupees to determine the GST payable. For example, import of goods you take. Import of goods, the foreign currency is there. You need to compute IGST. So for that, what should be taken as the Indian rupee value? Same way in case of export of goods. Say export of goods not treat as zero rated or treat as zero rated, but you gone for option 1, that is export on payment of IGST. If you need to pay IGST, then what should be taken as the value in that case? So you need to convert it into Indian rupees. So for that you need to take CBIC rate. In case of goods, take the CBIC rate. So Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs will be notifying the exchange rate from time to time. Whatever is the exchange rate notified by CBIC, you take that rate. And on which date should be taken? On the date of time of supply. So you need to determine the time of supply for the transaction, and on time of supply whatever is the rate, exchange rate notified CBIC, that should be taken. In case of service also same. First you determine the time of supply for the transaction, and for the transaction time of supply we need to see what is the GAAP rate, not CBIC notified rate. For services we need to take GAAP rate. Usually the GAAP rate is the average of the buying rate and selling rate on that day. Average of buying rate and selling rate, average of buying rate and selling rate on that day. Okay, average of the buying rate and selling rate on that day, that will be taken. Okay, clear here? So that is the GAAP rate prevailing on the time of supply determined under section 13. In case of goods, time of supply is determined under section 12. In case of services, time of supply is determined under section 13. So on the date of time of supply, whatever is the CBIC rate you take for goods, whatever is the GAAP rate you take for services, and you record the transaction for payment of GST. Suppose if the actual exchange rate is more or less, there can be forex gain or forex loss. We understood 72 rupees per dollar as the value for export of services, but 75 rupees per dollar is the actual realization. On that 3 rupees again we need to pay GST, not required. Ignore forex gain or forex loss. So once you follow rule 34 and you pay the GST, so ignore exchange gain or loss for the purpose of GST. Understood? Ignore that exchange gain or loss. This is about rule 34. And rule 35 says whenever the value, whenever the price is charged inclusive of GST, that is GST not separately collected. Whenever GST is not separately collected, you need to take the value or the price as inclusive of GST and calculate GST on inclusive basis. Okay, that is given in rule 35. Up to rule 35 only we have. So section 15, meaning of value of supply, and rule 27 to rule 35 deals with the provisions related to CGST rules related to valuation. And there are few circulars here. This point already we completed. TCS not to be included in the value, already I discussed. And see this, when there is a business facilitator and a business correspondent, these business facilitators and business correspondents are like agents of a banking company who will be appointed wherever the banking company is not having a branch in order to extend the banking operations in those places. Okay, for example, you went to one village and you don't have cash. There is no ATM also in that village. Now how will you get? You find a business facilitator in that village. So that will be one kirana shop, and in that kirana shop, so you go and you tell that I am so and so person, I need cash. So now that kirana shop, they will be maintaining a device which will be supplied by the bank, and you swipe your card and they will give you the cash. What is this? Business facilitators. And these business facilitators, business correspondents, banking operations. For example, you are located in a particular place and you got a check from the government, or you got a check from someone, and that is ICICI bank check, and you don't have any account. So therefore, you give it to the business correspondent, that check. The business correspondent will make a deposit and will convert it into cash and hand it over to you. So that is a job done by a business correspondent. So under the financial inclusion scheme of the government, so business correspondents and business facilitators are appointed by the banking company, and these people will be collecting some charges and will be remitting those charges to the bank. So these bank charges which are collected by business correspondent and business facilitator, are they required to pay GST on that bank charges? No. They are not required to pay. Who will be required to pay? The banking company only required to pay. Then what is the value on which they need to pay GST? They get commission. On that commission they will pay GST. Okay. So say this, a banking company will be appointing business correspondent or facilitator, and there is a customer. So these people will be receiving service charges. These service charges will be remitted to the banking company, and on that service charges who will pay GST? Banking company will pay GST, whereas business correspondent or facilitator, what is the value in their hands? Only the commission. So GST on commission. Okay. And in this regard, we need to know about FCM or RCM. So business correspondent services, GST is payable under FCM on the commission, and in case of business facilitator service, GST payable under RCM, which means that I am business correspondent, I get some commission from the bank. Who will pay GST? I should only pay GST because it is taxable under forward charge mechanism. I am a business facilitator, I get commission from the bank. On that commission, who will pay GST? Bank will pay GST under RCM. That is this note. This is just a connecting point which I have given in this place. So with this, value of supply is over. So we completed this, but mostly these areas you need to remember, and practical questions. For solving practical questions, this chapter will be useful. Okay.